Welcome to our Mentor Perspectives, a panel discussion with Check and Connect mentors. My name is Joe Angerin, and I am one of the Check and Connect trainers here at the University of Minnesota. And it's my pleasure to welcome the three individuals to my right here. And I'm going to do some brief introductions. To my immediate right is Waleed Maroof. And Waleed is a graduation and career coach at Washington High School in Indiana. He was also a presenter yesterday with Ivy Technical Community College in Indiana. And so he's going to talk about his experience. To Waleed's right is Jordan Zardi. Jordan is with Eastern Carver County Schools in Minnesota, about 45 minutes southwest of here. She is a youth development and intervention specialist. And a special shout out to Jordan. She is a gracious last-minute replacement for a panelist who couldn't be here. Her supervisee couldn't be here, so Jordan, as the supervisor, happened to have the good fortune or ill timing to be standing next to me when I found that out. And so she graciously agreed to participate, so thank you, Jordan. And then, yes. At the far right is Deborah Cook. Deborah is a coordinator and lead mentor of Check and Connect at Sumner Elementary in Austin, Minnesota, in the southern part of Minnesota, almost pretty close to the Iowa border. So she's going to talk about her experiences. So the mentors are going to talk about their experiences with Check and Connect and increasing student engagement, and they're going to share some challenges, some success stories, and talking about the success of their program. And so the format we'll do is I've got a series of questions that I'm just going to kind of have the mentors address, and then we'll allow time for audience questions towards the end of the presentation. Anne Romine is in the back there. Wave your hand, Anne. There she is. She's got the microphone, and so she's going to run around and get questions if you'd like to address them to the panel. So let's start here, and let's talk about, first of all, why did you become a mentor?
I guess I'm on the right, so I'll start. I am a mentor because it's basically built into my specific position. I'm a graduation and career coach, so I work in a high school with at-risk students to try to get them to graduate from high school and connect into either industry or post-secondary learning. My whole job revolves around the mentorship that I have with my students, and it was kind of after I got the job, I think within 2 or 3 weeks, I started the Check and Connect training. So that's how I became a mentor. It's my job. So.
Okay. Thank you, Waleed.
We use AmeriCorps Promise Fellows in our district to do a lot of our Check and Connect mentoring. And so Nancy, my supervisee, who was supposed to be on this panel, she was going to speak about that experience. And so for the most part, I'll answer questions from the perspective of a Promise Fellow, although I'm not a Promise Fellow. I do Check and Connect mentoring. I have one mentee in our alternative high school. And the reason I became a mentor is, first of all, I think I need to practice what I preach. If I train AmeriCorps Promise Fellows on how to do Check and Connect in our district, I need to know what I'm talking about firsthand. But also my background is working with students in higher education, colleges and universities. And so coming from that background, I really saw that a lot of what students need to be successful at that level happens long before they start at a college or university. And so I think that Check and Connect mentoring really has connected with me in that way, being able to provide students the resources and the skills that they need to be successful at a much earlier age.
Good morning, everyone. I see some of you are looking like you need a little movement or something. So others of you, you're ready to go and you're focused on the panel, but we're so glad that you're here. I became a mentor actually because my principal offered the opportunity to me 2 years ago. Prior to that, I had been a 4th grade teacher in a learning suite setting. So 3 individual staff in a room half this size with 70 students, so that's where my expertise was. And when she offered the mentorship and coordinator position to me, I didn't know anything about Check and Connect. So she spent a good hour or two kind of giving me a crash course. And I certainly took advantage of the opportunity, and then I had a chance to come here and go through all of the different training. And according to my principal, the reason that she asked me to be a mentor was because even prior to the Check and Connect program, I was one of those teachers who was very comfortable going into homes, regardless of the home environment or where the home was located in the city. I was very comfortable going into homes and meeting with family members just throughout my career, so she felt I would be a good fit for the program.
Great, thank you very much. Let's talk about kind of a general overview of what's a typical day look like when you're mentoring.
So, as I said, I'm a graduation and career coach in a high school. So my day revolves around meeting students in my office. I oftentimes will get in. I have access to their grades, attendance, disciplinary records, and all of that. So I will go over those things in the morning, decide which students I'm going to meet. I think I have a caseload of about 50, so I meet with all 50 students, or try to meet with all 50 students each week. So I'll go over their grades, attendance, basically everything that they've been up to. Then I'll bring them into my room. And I like personally to really just get at how they've been, how they're doing, how they're feeling, what's up, and really try to gauge, whether they're succeeding or they're not doing it so well, if that's based on their emotions or their needs or something like that. And then I'll talk with them. I like to talk a lot about hobbies and stuff with my students, really plug those interests into my work. And after we get done talking, I'll send them back to class. Just try not to keep them out for too long.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Waleed.
So
Jordan.
similarly, our Promise Fellows are dedicated Check and Connect mentors. So that is their full-time work, is to be Check and Connect mentors. So they each have a caseload of about 30 students. That fluctuates given the time of year and what students are needing the support, but about 30 students. And so their primary focus is 20 to 30 minutes with each student each week on a one-on-one basis. But obviously that doesn't fill up a 40-hour work week. So the rest of their time during the day is spent kind of doing the incidental things that need to happen to continue to build that relationship with students. So for the most part, our Promise Fellows are working just with 9th and 10th graders. So if there is an algebra class that it has a high concentration of their 9th grade Check and Connect students, they might go to that class and just be a resource in the classroom, supporting those students in the work that they're doing there. Or if a student is having some behavioral issues in a particular class and needs just a 10-minute reset to get their mind centered around learning and being able to be successful in the classroom, the teacher might send that student to their Check and Connect mentor, their Promise Fellow, to get that time to reset and to really refocus. And so that's kind of the majority of how they spend their day. A lot of the time that they use during their 20 to 30 minutes with that student is usually the first half is focused just on relationship building, that talking with students, getting to know them, talking about hobbies, things that they're interested in, shared interests that they might have with the Promise Fellow. And then the second half is really spent on using that check data to talk about what interventions that student might be needing, what goals that they need to create and meet, and how the Promise Fellow can be supportive of that.
Great, thank you.
Since my role is twofold, I have approximately 25 students that I mentor myself, and then as the coordinator, we have 35 to 40 students in the elementary building. So I work with the mentors as well, but I'll focus on when I have students coming into my office, what it looks like for them. So it's a 20-minute session. It's all organized ahead of time with the staff. I've looked at their schedules. We've coordinated around what time would be best to have the student 20 minutes out of their classroom setting. And for those 20 minutes, we're on schedule. I pick the child up at his or her classroom. We walk down to my office. And the first piece is socialization. Just a few minutes of, I saw you at the football game last night. It was really great to see your junior high brother play. How did you feel about it? Or making connections about, yesterday you had that math test. How do you think it went? So really that social piece. And the next thing I do, we have Infinite Campus. So I actually pull up the Infinite Campus with my passcode already in it. And even the first grade students know now how to go from that point. They'll find their name and they'll open up their absent and tardy file first. And we'll look at, for the week, what did their absences and tardies total up to. And then we actually take the minutes of school that they've missed for that week, if it's applicable for that student. So we'll take the 6 hours from a school day and add in any tardies and then talk about what could that possibly have been. An entire math lesson could equate to that, or their favorite subject is Phy-Ed, and so perhaps it equates to a lesson and a half of their Phy-Ed and health class. After that, we open up the behavior tab and we look over any behaviors they might have had that week, minor behaviors or significant behaviors, which leads us into the problem solving. I'll save that portion, that's coming up in just a little bit, so we go through the problem solving strategies of that. And then if there are any additional areas that we need to discuss, because I really want it to be individualized, we go over any individual information with that child. So they're very aware that we're looking over absences and tardies and behaviors together. Coursework, although I have access to the tools, it's actually easier for me to have their coursework written down instead of having them look in the computer. So we'll go over any coursework together, and at the elementary level, that's their reading for the week, math for the week, Scantron, MCAs, and OPA. And again, they're very aware of their targets and their goals, and we strive to have them meet those targets and goals. So within the 20-minute period, we spend the first portion focusing on all those areas, which is the same thing I do when I visit the homes or send an email. That's the same arrangement that's made so the families are aware of what it looks like when their child comes into my office. And then following that, with the problem-solving steps, we'll work through, if we need to, any situation there. And at the conclusion, I always want the students to end with an affirmation statement. I can, I want to, I belong. And that can look differently depending on the age of the child. For the younger students, it might be them verbalizing it, and then I'm writing their information in their agenda for them. We're an AVID school, so the students do bring their agendas to me, and I'll write down those statements so the parents are aware. And then keeping in mind, since I follow the same program at the child's home, the caregiver, grandparent, adoptive parent, whomever it might be, at the end, they also need to have those same affirmations. My child can. My child wants to. My child belongs, and they finish those statements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. A great example of, I think, what Dr. Rushley talked about this morning in terms of intervening early, starting in the elementary schools, if not earlier, and kind of stepping in and trying to address some of those indicators of disengagement. One of the main challenge or main roles of the mentor is to develop a relationship with student and to develop trust. So I'd like if the panel could talk a little bit about how have you built trust and a relationship with students. You've talked a little bit about it, including what are some strategies that you found you've been successful with, some success stories if you have those, and then what have been some challenges also all around building trust with students.
So I want to make whenever a person first walks into my office, I tell them that the space that they're in is safe. I tell them as long as they're not hurting themselves, as long as somebody's not hurting them, or other people are hurting other people that they know of, I don't have to report anything. So if you're mad at somebody, I don't know, a teacher or something like that, and you want to come in and blow off some steam, then that's okay with me, as long as it remains safe. I don't know. Sure. But so I try to create a safe environment. That's the first step I try to do. The second is I try to be as laid back and easygoing as possible. I do that through my body. I mean, I'm a pretty laid back and casual going person as it is, so I try to mimic that in my body posture and the words I use. That usually helps. I don't tell them to do things. I give them my input and I try to empower them. I try to let them know that whatever they want to do, they can do, and whatever goal they want to achieve, I will help in any way possible. I also try to listen to their interests. Like I say, we talk a lot about how they're feeling, what they like, and then I try to connect those interests to either the community or to a group that they can participate in. I know some of my students are really into the idea of becoming video game designers and game designers as a whole. So I worked with them, and since I work within the school system, I started an after-school club for game design. Something as simple as that, really turns up engagement in those students, and it makes them, excited about Thursday after school. And then also I have some students that are interested in going into law enforcement. So I've worked out a deal where I can take them into the local security center, the local jail, and have a tour for them. And so just little things like that, trying to get them to be as comfortable, as honest, as open with me as possible, and then trying to really connect them to things they're passionate about and things they might want to achieve in life.
Okay. Thank you. Jordan.
I think using Promise Fellows for Check and Connect mentoring has a lot of really great benefits and a lot of challenges when it comes to building trust with students. One of the easiest parts of it is that oftentimes our Promise Fellows are recent college graduates. So they're young and they speak the same language and they understand the same kind of culturally relevant things that our students are talking about. And so those relationships are built very easily and they can find lots of common interests with one another. And so I think that that's a very natural way for our Promise Fellows to build relationships. One of the challenges of that is that Promise Fellows aren't necessarily required to have any educational or student experience before becoming Promise Fellows. So sometimes we're getting Promise Fellows that are coming to us with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And while that may be super helpful for tutoring a student who's studying chemistry and is struggling there, that doesn't necessarily lend itself towards having a natural affinity for working with kids. So we do a lot of work at the beginning of the year to provide a lot of tools and resources and experiences for Promise Fellows so that they have ways to interact with students and to begin to get to know students. So things as simple as goal mapping or get-to-know-you sheets that look like a Facebook page that students can draw on, like silly things, but things that help folks connect with students a little bit easier and build that relationship quickly. So I think that those are kind of the things that have really helped folks who don't have experience in education or working with students build those relationships and build that trust quickly. We also are very forward and strict about our Promise Fellows not having anything to do with the disciplinary process in their schools. They often work really closely with the deans of the schools, and so sometimes that can feel like a natural extension to the high school that they're working in, that, oh, well, the Promise Fellow will take care of that, or the Promise Fellow can provide that conversation or that discipline or that call home to parents about what your child did wrong. And we've worked really hard with schools to make sure that that is not a role that they play so that they can fully take on the role of a positive reinforcement in that student's life and not have anything to do with the disciplinary process. And along with that, that's been really helpful then as Promise Fellows build trust with teachers, that teachers know that they can send a student to a Promise Fellow to get that positive reset so that, okay, so you're struggling in class, it's not a good day, so go talk with a Promise Fellow about what's not going well in your day, have that positive reset, and then come back to class when you're prepared and feel like you're ready to learn and to participate. One of the challenges we've had with Promise Fellows is that the Promise Fellow position is a one-year position, so there's no guarantee that a Promise Fellow will come back and serve a second year with those same students. So, with the Check and Connect model, having an ideal of working with students for 2 years, we can't always meet that. We do on occasion have Promise Fellows that come back and work for a second year, and that's really wonderful, and we hope that that's the case, but that doesn't always happen, and so we've tried to work really well on transitional materials for Promise Fellows to use to go from year to year So helping students to understand that I'm not going to be your Promise Fellow next year, but if we've hired someone already, this is who is, and this is how you can have a positive relationship with them. And I think we've done a fairly good job of that, because at this point in time, we have students who across school buildings recognize the Promise Fellow position as someone who cares about them, wants to connect with them, and someone that they can trust regardless of whether or not they know who that person is specifically. So even when we have students transfer from one high school into another high school, they're looking for that Promise Fellow person. They're like, okay, who's the Promise Fellow? Who's my person? And so I think that that's been really helpful in building that trust too, that we've worked with students to understand this position is for you. Even if you don't know the person, the position represents someone who is for you.
Great, thank you.
Working in an elementary setting, of course, has a different feel, just because the children with their age and their development, 7 years old being the age of reasoning, and I actually start working with first graders. So building the trust and relationship, depending on their age and, of course, their background and where they're coming from, does make a difference. The first 4 to 6 times I meet with the child, I'm really conscientious about the fact that we are simply going to play. We're going to play with the Rubik's Cube, we're going to play Battleship, Chutes and Ladders, Monopoly, we're going to play with the dolls, we're going to draw, different things that engage each individual child. So as you walk by the office the first couple of weeks of school, if you're not aware of Check and Connect, it simply looks like my role is to play with children. Well, I'm trying to build that safe place and that trust level. And while we're playing, I'm bringing up questions about perhaps their baby sister or their dog. I'm making sure that I have all of the family information ahead of time that I can gather either through Infinite Campus, through former teachers that have worked with the child, or perhaps I taught their sibling because of my change of roles, and so I'm already aware of the family. And just by showing interest in their family is key for a lot of these students. And the other thing that I try to do within the first 4 to 6 weeks of school is happen to be casually walking around their neighborhood. And a lot of times I'll bump into the students playing outside, or I'll be able to say, I walked by your house and it was blue. And those are the things for an elementary student that just, they become engaged with you and you're developing that trust along the way. So during the playtime, it is conversations about their interests. And as far as any challenges that I have had in my 2 years of experience so far, I want to be careful as I phrase this. A challenge with communication of the families who I need an interpreter for. And the reason I want to be careful about that is because without our interpreters, our school system wouldn't be able to operate, and I'm very appreciative of everything that they do. The challenge is that if I'm trying to develop a trust with a family member or a guardian, and I'm needing to use an interpreter, sometimes that trust takes longer to build, simply because that family member has to open up to me as well as to the interpreter. So they're really having to stretch their boundaries and be comfortable sharing perhaps some private situations with 2 people now instead of 1. So I just want to stress again, it's not the interpreter or having an interpreter, it's just that the family member has to jump the hurdle twice. So in that case, instead of the first 4 to 6 conversations over the phone or family visits with the interpreter, I often will lengthen it to 7 or 8 times that I visit with the family prior to addressing any absences, tardies, behaviors, or coursework, and just have casual social conversations. And I lengthen the stay just so that the interpreter, the family member, and myself can develop a trio of trust.
Love that term, trio of trust. That's great. Another role of the mentor is to always to think about building capacity in students and solving problems with students rather than for students. And so talk a little bit about what that process looks like at each level in terms of developing capacity and solving problems.
So I guess I'll jump back into the club that we established, was the Video Game Design Club. So I really don't know how to design a video game, which is awesome because I founded a video game club. And so I kind of shift that onto the students. It's really interest-driven, and I try to facilitate any help that they need. I mean, I'll do some research and I'll have some background information, but I really let the students go, and then if they need help, they know they can come to me. I also like to, like I said, empower my students, so I will put them in charge of, large projects. We had an activity or career fair the last semester, and I worked closely with my students, but they really made all the decisions of who's going to be there. They organized it, they ran it. On a smaller scale, if they're having, I use my office time a lot as time to sit with my students and talk with them about their struggles. I'm not good at algebra. I'm not good at geometry. Well, me neither. Let's try to figure it out together. And so we'll take a step-by-step approach in that. I also try to connect them to tutoring opportunities throughout the school. We have a peer-to-peer tutor opportunity, and I try to make them feel as safe and comfortable with that before, encouraging them to sign it up. Because, like I said, I'm not good at geometry, so I'm sure somebody in the school knows how to do it. And those are kind of the steps I try to take to ensure that my students are good at problem solving, are good at having that untapped potential tapped, I guess is a way to say it. I think, yeah.
All right, thank you. Jordan.
Our Promise Fellows ask a lot of really good questions. Like, that's what they focus a lot of their conversations with students on doing is, okay, so I hear you telling me this. Well, how did it make you feel? And how did you respond? And how did that work? Did it work well? Did it not work well? If you could do it differently, what would you do next time? So just asking a lot of those good questions to get students to kind of come to their own answers and their own solutions around, okay, well, now that you've asked me all these questions, I see that I responded in this way and that didn't go well because that made this person feel this way. And so next time I would maybe try it differently in this way. So a lot of those just kind of leading questions to help students identify their own challenges and their own solutions for how they get things done. Our experience has also been in the schools that we have Promise Fellows in, a lot of times our students that are struggling in some way, shape, or form because they have a lack of knowledge of how to navigate the school building or the school experience. So, maybe they have parents who never finished high school or who didn't seek secondary or post-secondary education after high school. And so in some way they're lacking the supports and the knowledge of how do I do this school thing. And so that may result in not knowing how to have positive conversations with teachers. Like, if no one's ever taught me how to talk to a teacher appropriately, how do I know how to talk to a teacher appropriately, especially when I'm mad? And so our Promise Fellows do a lot of working with students on, okay, so you had this interaction with the teacher, you're telling me it didn't go well, you're telling me that you're still mad and you're frustrated, so how do we go back to that teacher in a way that's positive for both of you? And have that conversation again or try to come to a better solution. And so a lot of it is that constructive coaching around, okay, this is how to navigate school, this is how to do this successfully, and helping them kind of work through that process. So it may be that the first couple times that they have a challenge with a teacher, going with that student to talk with the teacher about what that challenge was. And then maybe the next time it's, helping that student process that conversation and maybe role play that conversation ahead of time, but then the student goes and has that conversation on their own. So it's building that capacity of how do I navigate this place and how do I make success for myself.
We have a 5-step process that we follow with the students. And the first one is to identify the problem. And of course, we use a capital I, and we make sure, as we have it on our bulletin boards or written in front of the student, that they really focus on the I. Those of you that have children of your own, or those of you that have been in an elementary system, you know the conversation might start like this. Well, Danica made a funny face, and then Jose laughed at it, and then Jose laughed right in my face, and I didn't know why he was laughing. And then Mary came up in the conversation, and they're naming everybody else and all the different decisions that other people made in the conversation. So even before we begin the 5-step process, we have to do some background about I want to hear your name only. You can't use any other individual names or the teacher. So after the student has identified the problem, then we brainstorm. So the second step is to brainstorm different solutions. Because again, I'm working with 6 through 11-year-olds, so we need to come up using the different AVID strategies and flow maps and brainstorming and such with possible solutions. After that, the students pick one. They pick the solution that they like best. Now, depending on the age of the student, we may have brainstormed 5 solutions. If they're a younger child, I'll narrow it down to 2 or ask them to narrow it down to 2 before they pick one. So you have to have it age appropriate. So the student picks one. After the student picks one, then they try it. And they have 24 hours to try it, whatever it might be. And within that 24-hour time frame, even if it happens to fall on a Friday afternoon, I make sure that I do a follow-up call with the child at home and ask how it's going. Did you have a chance to try it yet? So that if there's an event that happens on a Friday, they're not having to hold it over until Monday when I see them. And after the trying it part is the follow-up. Did it work? Again, using elementary language, did it work? Yes, so we have had success and we've learned. No, then we actually start the entire process over again, even though the problem may have been 3 days ago. So we go back to identifying the problem. And I just want to talk a little bit about identifying the problem. Oftentimes the problem really isn't that an individual pushed you in line. The problem is that you came to school hungry. And even after you ate the free and reduced school lunch breakfast, you're still hungry. It's 10 a.m. and your lunchtime isn't until 12:20. So as I get to know the students and work with them, identify the problem is trying to get to the root of the problem as to why they really made that decision. So you're hungry. What are your brainstorming options? You can come to my office and ask for food. I have a healthy snack drawer. You could go to the principal or our school secretary. They have healthy snack drawers. You could have told the individual in charge in your classroom that you're hungry, and they would have gone to their snack drawer. So finding the root of the problem at the elementary age really often boils down to, my dog ran away last night and the dog hasn't come home yet. It's not always a conflict with another person, and it's helping the students realize what the problem is, not necessarily the shoving, the pushing, the fighting, the cursing. Yes, sometimes that comes into play, but at least in the younger ages, it's oftentimes about the basic needs not being met or about worries that they have for family and friends and pets.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Another great, I think, connection to what we heard this morning about getting to the why. Why are students not coming to school? Why are students not being successful? And then I think with all 3 panels, if you've taken part in Check and Connect, any of our trainings, you recognize some of the techniques that they're using, such as reflective listening, coaching, scaffolding support for students, the I do, you do, we do model Jordan described, and just having knowledge about child development and what's appropriate at certain ages. So I commend all 3 of you for kind of incorporating many of those strategies. Let's talk about another core component of Check and Connect, and that's partnering with parents, parent engagement. And so let's talk a little bit about what kind of strategies, successes, or challenges have you had when you partner with parents?
So working in a high school, I work with a lot of at-risk students, and those students tend to be at risk a lot of times, not all times, but because they may not have that support at home. So to be honest with you, working with students has been pretty difficult in my specific setting. I make it a point to send out a letter, like a physical, old-school letter, to every parent of the student or parent or guardian of the student that I'm working with. I have my phone number, I have my email. So I try to make myself as readily available as possible. Beyond that, I haven't had to make any home calls or visits. This is the first year of our program, so we're still fresh-faced, I guess. But a lot of my experience with parents have been in teacher meetings or meetings with the principals, meeting with guidance counselors, meeting with learning resources. And I like to sit in on those with my students to try to advocate for them, as well as really get to some face-to-face interaction with their parents, see how they're doing at home, see how the kids doing at home, and then also I try to reinforce that I'm readily available anytime they need anything. But I haven't done as well as I had hoped, so I hope to continue to better that in the future.
So I think family engagement is, as I've been working with Check and Connect going on my third year now, and I think across the board I hear from folks that do this work that that's maybe one of the hardest pieces of Check and Connect is engaging families. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I would say that we're no exception, that this is probably the hardest part of our work, and the place that we struggle the most to do it well. For us, at the district level, it's difficult because there's not a lot of good systems in place for folks that aren't social workers or school psychologists to do things like home visits. It's possible, it's just difficult. And so especially with Promise Fellows who are recent college graduates who don't have a lot of experience working in education, that just makes it all the more difficult. I will also say, and I can say this because I am a millennial, but owning that millennials, we're not great at making phone calls. We love to text, and we're very comfortable with email. Any kind of digital communication is great, but making a phone call home can be really intimidating for folks who haven't had a lot of experience doing parent engagement, parent contact kind of things. And so we have to do a lot of work on the front end of okay, this is a script for a phone call, and maybe we practice one where I sit in my office and you sit in your office and you call me and we practice this. And so we've had to do a lot of that work on the front end, and I will say even then, we're not great at it. I think the places that we've had the most success are when we just we'll sit down and do a day of okay, today's parent contact day. And so we're gonna, block off 4 or 5 hours, and we're gonna do nothing but call parents and have positive conversations about their students, and just make those good connections. We do send a letter home at the beginning of every year, both digitally and in paper copy, with every student that's receiving Check and Connect mentoring, letting parents know about what Check and Connect mentoring is, giving the parent the option to opt out of Check and Connect mentoring for their student if they want to. And we've recently incorporated including a picture of the Check and Connect mentor on those letters, just so that when the parent is in the school building, that they know that face, that they feel like they know someone and can connect with someone. And when their student comes home talking about their Check and Connect mentor, they have a visual of who that person is. We also ask our Promise Fellows to try to connect with families when we have conference nights, or at our Integrated Arts Academy, they do a gala where the students display all their artwork, and then parents are invited to come in and enjoy appetizers and view their students' work for the year. So at big family events like that, we ask Check and Connect mentors and Promise Fellows to really connect with parents during that time and try as best you can to get around to everyone, even if it's just to say hi and to reintroduce yourself again. So we try to take advantage of the times when parents are in the school buildings to really capitalize on that, because home visits aren't really a possibility for our Promise Fellows.
Thank you. Deborah.
Family engagement for me starts actually with the youth that I'm working with. The first time that I meet with each child, I have them either call an adult at home, email an adult at home, text an adult at home, FaceTime. You think of all the different methods, and depending on the age of the child and their circumstances, they may not have any phone number that is working at the time. They may not have access to internet, etc. So then it could be drawing a picture, and then that goes in the mail. So the first time that I visit with a child, it's always a positive contact with the family as well, done through the child. And oftentimes, once we have that first initial, the students, the next time they see me, will say, am I going to call home today? Do I get to call grandma? And for those students who don't have necessarily a strong person at home who's accessible, we'll actually connect them with somebody else in the building, and we will then send the text to that adult so they still have immediate feedback. We even have a teacher who retired, and I had connected her with a child last year, and that child and I still send text to that retired teacher so that she has the response as well. She has that immediate text response coming back. So it's all the different ways that we can think of to have the youth be the first person to contact a family member in the variety of modes that are out there. Also, working with family members, anytime we have registration, open house, conferences, IEP meetings, whatever it might be, I'm always there. I make sure that the family member has knowledge ahead of time, especially if it's their first IEP, for example. That's usually a lengthy meeting. There's a lot of terminology in there that people who aren't in the educational field are familiar with. So I'm placing phone calls, or I'm sending emails, or I'm going to the home, and I'm visiting with the adult who's going to attend the IEP meeting, and I'm talking through ahead of time what the paperwork looks like. I can bring blank copies of the paperwork and talk about what the goals for their child might be. They can practice ahead of time a question that they might ask at the IEP meeting to make sure their child is receiving the services they should. And I even do this with families who are in foster care, youth that are in foster care. I connect with the foster parents, and I really have them as involved as possible in the school system. When I do home visits, I always make sure that it's a comfortable setting, and on the first home visit, I make sure that I've done some cultural background as well. So I know that when I enter the home, my shoes should be off, for example, and they should be sitting in the hallway for my Corinne and Corinne families. I know that when I go into other homes, I need to bow at the adults, and I know what level I need to be as far as their bow compared to my bow. So it's really having that cultural background. So when I enter into their home, or even if we're just visiting on the steps or the backyard, I'm very aware and I'm very respectful of their environment, and I want them to recognize that. Have I made some faux pas in the past? I'm sure I have. The families haven't shared it with me, but I know that I have not always made the right moves or perhaps said all of the right things. When I have an interpreter come with, I make sure that I visit with that interpreter ahead of time so we're both very aware. Or when we have a phone conversation, we both have the idea of what we're going to be talking about, so the interpreter doesn't go in without that background knowledge as well. As far as some success stories, I think building that relationship with the family members is key, and letting them know that you're there as a cheerleader. When a family member comes to conferences, I'm going to sit next to that family member. I'm not going to sit on the side of the table with the adult or teacher. And I'm going to work with that family member ahead of time so they're comfortable. There won't be any information that they haven't heard before, because every week they're receiving the ABCs from me or from their child or in their child's agenda through AVID. They have all of that information. So in the case of the Check and Connect students, when they arrive at their conferences, the staff member that's running the conference, or the staff members that are at the conference, they're going to have all of the positive things to share. Are we going to touch upon the ABCs? Yes, briefly though. The majority of the conference, because we have the weekly communication, is really going to be about all the things your child is doing right. I think we need families to realize that the education system is there for them. We need them to buy into the fact that it really is a team effort. One success story in particular, and some of you may have heard this one yesterday. last year I started working with a little second grade girl and her family, and getting to know the family members, going to the home on a regular basis. And mid-year, her mother lost her job unexpectedly. So the family went through struggles. I, of course, supplied all of the Mower County resources available so that the family was receiving all of the services that they possibly could, and I made sure that, in this case, the mother was very aware of what the county had to offer. And then I worked with the mother on believing in herself. Her daughter needed to believe in herself. The daughter and mother needed to believe in themselves as a team. The mother needed to start building up her own self-esteem. And through months of working with this family and this mother, we were talking about the different jobs that she had applied for and unfortunately the failures that she was having each time she was applying for a job. So I spent some time with her just like I would with the students in career guidance, asking her what type of problem she'd like to solve in the world and looking at her skills and talents. And even though her background was in one area for the jobs that she'd had in her life, what else was open to her, and helping her see through a different lens the possible jobs that she could apply for, working with her to put together a resume. She put in some job applications and didn't hear back from some. Others she heard no from. And then the day came when she called me very excited, and she had a job interview. She asked me to come to the job interview with her. She was very nervous about it. She asked me to come to her house to look at her hairstyle, to talk about clothing that she should wear that's appropriate. So one night I'm over at the house and the mother is trying the different hairstyles and she's just showing me different clothing that she might wear. The daughter's right there the whole time, just loving the moment as well. And then the day came for the parent to go to the interview. She does not have a vehicle, nor does she at this time have the opportunity to drive a vehicle. So I'm not picking up family members or I'm not picking up youth. That's not part of my Check and Connect mentoring or coordinating position. In our district, that's a completely different level of security that you need. And yes, I could apply for it. However, my teacher education background tells me you don't drive a child in your car, you don't take a family member. So I may jump that hurdle at some time. So I meet the mother at the place where she's going for her job interview. We meet with the individual and she wants me to stay there. She answers the interview questions and she is offered the position right there. She asked me to stay with her through the HR process because she needs assistance filling out the paperwork. So I assist her filling out the paperwork as well. And incredibly proud of this woman and how well she composed herself through this process. And the time came for the photo so that she would have identification to be able to enter into her job the very next day to start training. And that's when she just, in a way, broke down. And it hit her that she was really going to start a new job. And according to her, I really pushed her out of her comfort zone. It's a job she would have never applied for. She was never going to, at that point, consider herself to be qualified in the area of the job. The most that this woman had made in her career was $9 an hour, and she was very proud of a $9 per hour job. This job started at $10.50, and within a month would bump her up to $13.50. So when you're talking about Check and Connect and building the child up, you're actually building the entire family up. And you're making sure that all the opportunities that you would work hard for with that child and make sure that child has all of those opportunities, the family needs to have all of those opportunities as well.
Such an inspiring story. That's just wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And it really is, for all of the work that we focus on with children, we're bringing parents along with us in the journey. We want them to partner. Let's maybe see if we have some questions. I've just got maybe one other question for the panel, but if other people have questions, if you could raise your hand and Ann will come by with the microphone. I'll give you time to There we go.
I'm just wondering if you could briefly speak to the support that you get. So maybe from a coordinator or, just kind of maybe in the course of a week or so, what is some examples of the support that it's taken to get you to be able to function effectively with your student caseload?
So my program is pretty cool. We are in the Southwest Indiana, and we have about 8 grad coaches in different high schools around the region. And we use this thing called Slack. It's basically like instant messaging. You can create groups, you can direct message people. And all of us, plus our supervisors, are in that every day. We instantly load it up when we get there in the morning. So we're always in communication, whether that be asking about a specific scenario, a specific case, or just asking, how's your day? We try to build a good, strong communication and connection with one another, and really try to create a good environment to work in, a good supportive environment. My supervisor, who is in the audience, yeah, okay, don't, all right, yeah, never, all right. She's great. She always is willing to, any problems we have, any connections we want to make with our local industries or local educational institutions, she's always willing to reach out and make those connections. And so we've been very lucky to have a good supportive group with where we can bring any questions, or if we need resources. I know we have like McDonald's gift cards and Dairy Queen gift cards, and that all comes from our supervisor. So it's a really good environment to work in that really lets us focus on the student and not so much the details of getting a gift card and stuff like that. So yeah.
So our Promise Fellows kind of have 2 levels of support that are available to them. We have a 2-tiered approach to supervision for them. So I supervise them at the district level, and I have gone through all the Check and Connect trainings, and so I provide the Check and Connect support. So we do a lot of professional development. I do one-on-one meetings with them every other week, and then on the off weeks we do group meetings with all of the Promise Fellows to provide additional professional development and support. And then within their individual buildings, they're also supervised usually by a dean. And so that dean provides the in-school support of here's the resources that are available in our specific school. Here's pieces of school culture that you may not know when you walk in the door. Here's staff members that you need to be connected with that can provide great things for your students. And so they provide that in-school support. We also have our Promise Fellows integrated into their intervention teams in their schools. So when students come up for review on that intervention team due to whatever challenge that student is facing, the Promise Fellow is part of that meeting to talk about any knowledge that they might have of that student if that student is already on their Check and Connect caseload, as well as to hear from other staff what are the additional resources the student is receiving outside of Check and Connect. So we really integrate all of those resources for students really well. And the Promise Fellow is also there so that if a student comes up that's not on the Check and Connect caseload but could maybe benefit from it, the Promise Fellow can identify that right away and really bring to that team, okay, here's the things that I know I can provide for that student, and I'm ready to do that now, or I could do that in a couple of weeks, or things like that. So they're integrated really well into the school system in that way.
I'm not sure if this is a fair question because I'm the coordinator. So I've been speaking as a mentor, and now I'll speak as a coordinator. One of the things that I make sure that I provide for the mentors, and I'm very fortunate because they're actually all in the same school building that I'm at, so that of course makes it easier for contacts. I make sure that any of the data information prior to the new app release, where we had to transfer from one computer perhaps to another computer to a different program, I was doing all of that for them. So they didn't need to spend the time recording any of the behaviors or the absences or tardies. They, of course, were using their computer data to speak with the student and go through the process of the 20-minute meeting. But as far as actually entering any of the data, I take care of that portion for them. I also give them support in any role modeling that they might need. Not all of them are comfortable making phone calls. Not all of them are comfortable doing home visits. So we'll role model that together and what it looks like, sounds like. And then if need be, I can do a conference call with them so they're actually doing the speaking. I'll introduce myself first, although the families do know me, because as the coordinator, I felt that it was key that I actually meet with those families as well and get to know them in their homes or at a place that we are agreed upon, like the local park, wherever we might meet. So they utilize me in finding their comfort zone. The staff does, to make sure that they're meeting the needs of the Check and Connect program. Another area that I assist them with is every week I meet with the Check and Connect mentors individually. And then every other week I hold a group meeting where we're all together. And the best part about the group meeting is we have time, we have an hour. So we have kind of a round robin so that all the students that we talk about, all the students that we service are talked about at that meeting every other week. So we really have a good handle on the students in our building and what their highest needs might be. So those are some of the things as the coordinator that I do for the mentors or assist the mentors with to make sure that they're having a successful Check and Connect experience. And then I'm also the listener. They're going to come in and share their frustrations with me, and I know they're not necessarily looking for any feedback. They simply want somebody to sit there and listen. The support that I receive, or that the program receives, is from our principal. She actually went through the training here as well. She felt as the principal and in the school, she needed to have the Check and Connect training. So she received training from Joseph. And after other individuals received training, she made sure that she was following up with those mentors in our building. And at the district level, our superintendent is very supportive of the program, and he actually asked us to speak at a board meeting. Each year he's asked us to speak at a board meeting and discuss with the board how the program is set up. So I'm fortunate in that respect that really from the highest level down, the support is there for the entire program.
I'm going to ask a question, if that's okay. Have you ever had a difficult match? And how did you work through it with one of your mentees?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, we all have our own styles of mentoring. And sometimes our styles of mentoring just don't mesh with a certain person or a certain approach. So I've had students who, I mean, they might like me as a person, but my mentoring style might not hit home with them. It might not be as effective. So what we do in that scenario is we just be reflective about it, be very honest, open, no feelings hurt, no toes stepped on, and then try to improve on it. Try to say, okay, well, what can I do to better help you? And we go from there. So, yeah. I like to be open, honest, communicative, just, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Nancy, the Promise Fellow who wasn't able to join us today, she had a student that she was meeting with that knew what Check and Connect was. The school Nancy's in is a very small school, so all of the students know what Check and Connect is and understand the program very well. So she knew what Check and Connect was, and when she found out that she was going to have a Check and Connect mentor, she wasn't pleased. She didn't buy the setup. She didn't buy that mentors could do anything for her, and she didn't want to be part of the program, and was very, very frank about that. From the very first meeting was like, yeah, I don't want to be here. I'm not going to talk to you. I want nothing to do with this process. And so Nancy just worked through that, and they'd spent a lot of time just talking about nothing related to Check and Connect. It was months of, let's just talk about life and talk about interests. Well, 4 months down the road, they discovered that they shared an interest in Korean pop culture, which is a very kind of obscure thing to find a common interest in. Like, that's probably not at the forefront of everyone's mind. And so 4 months down the road, they found that connection and now have a really great mentoring relationship. Not to say that all all difficult matches end that way. Sometimes they don't. But I think that the key to Check and Connect is that persistence. It's even when it's hard and even when it doesn't feel like it's working, like these students need to know that there's someone in their life who's going to care no matter what, and no matter how many times you come to me and tell me that you hate having to meet with me and don't want to be here, I'm still going to be here. And so in this case, that really paid off in the end.
I'm going to echo as well. Yes, there certainly have been some matches where difficulty has arisen perhaps on either side of the situation. And we go back to the plan that we actually introduced for problem solving to the students. So I'm sitting with the mentor, I'm the coordinator, and they're sharing a situation with me, and they have to identify the problem, again, using the capital I. So we're going through your entire process that we would use on the students, except this time it's a little bit of a flipped. And you can imagine that the try it part oftentimes does not go well for perhaps several months at a time. And so we're just revisiting that circle over and over again. All right, identify the problem. Let's do brainstorming. Pick one. Try it. Within 24 hours, I make sure I follow up. Did it work? And if the answer is no, we keep going back to that pattern. I think part of it is just making sure that the mentor and the mentee know that they're there for each other, even if it's a personality difference or a conflict in other ways. They've committed to 2 years. They've said, I will for 2 years be a mentor for this student. And as the adults in the relationship, I'll give you all the tools that you need, but eventually you're the one that's going to have to make the bridge with the child to make sure that it's a successful meeting with that child.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got time, I think, for one last question for the panel here before lunch is here. And so in wrapping up here, what advice would you give to a mentor or someone considering becoming a mentor?
The most prominent thing to me, and the thing that I like most about Check and Connect, is that you're able to, like I mentioned before, have your own style. So what I would suggest is really leaning into your specific flavor. Really be yourself and be open and honest with them. Be patient. You have to be patient. But yeah, I mean, that's like the biggest thing to me is it sets up a good, Check and Connect sets up a good structure for you to work within, and you can figure out the specific path, how to reach, whoever you're mentoring, on like however you want. You can do it however you want. So bring your flavor is my quote. So
His new T-shirt motto right there.
yeah,
I think.
I'm already
Bring the
getting
flavor.
them printed.
Okay.
Yeah, you can buy them after the conference. It's going to be a big hit.
Thank you, Waleed.
No problem.
So we survey our students about every 2 years. All of our Check and Connect students get a survey to kind of reflect on their experience with the Check and Connect program and what they feel goes well and what they feel we could improve on. And so what we really have, the primary thing we've gotten back from that is that students want mentors who are consistent and who are committed. So they want a mentor who is going to show up every week and who is going to follow through on what they say they're going to do. In our district, we have Promise Fellows, but then in the schools we don't have Promise Fellows, and we use teaching staff as Check and Connect mentors, which has a whole other array of successes and challenges. But oftentimes it can be hard to find the time in your schedule to meet with students every single week. And so students really have said, no, if you say that that's what you're going to do with me, I want to see you there every single week. And if I don't show up because I'm having a bad week and I'm crabby and I don't want to be there, I want you to come get me. Even if I'm saying that's not what I want, that's what I want. I want you to be there. And then they want to know that you're committed. They want to know that you genuinely care as an adult and that care is going to be unconditional. It doesn't matter how many times I try something and am not successful and have to start the process over. You're going to be there and you're not going to get frustrated with me. You're just going to continue to work with me through that until it goes well or until I figure out a different solution or until we can move on to something new. So they really, they want that. That's what our students tell us they want. And so I think that as a mentor, Check and Connect is a really great framework for mentoring, but as long as you're being consistent and you're showing that you're committed, you can't go wrong.
Thank you. Deborah, last words.
To mentors, I would say recognize that you are making a 2-year commitment. Recognize that the majority of your time spent with the student or youth will be as a listener. Recognize the fact that you will be pushed out of your comfort zone.
Please join me in thanking all 3 of our mentors today. What a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for sharing.